Hello, I'm Devin Rue, a professional fantasy cartographer and illustrator, and you are listening to the Quip and Quill podcast.
I am Jen. Most people will know me as Long Dog Dice. I make resin dice and then a bunch of other things because I am addicted to gig work culture. So I do a lot of whatever people are willing to pay me to do, which sounds a little bit scandalous. It's usually very boring and involves spreadsheets.
Right? I mean, so why long dog dice? And boy, do I really want to say that wrong.
Oh yeah, no, that was one of the first things that happened when I started actually needing to have a name for something. I'm bad at naming things. It stresses me out so much. So when it was like, oh, I'm no longer gonna just be kind of making dice for me and my friends, and I'm gonna be doing this more. I need a name for something. I panicked and I looked at my floor where my two dachshunds are, and I went, congratulations, you've been promoted to mascot. And this is what we are now. We are Long Dog Dice, which has been, people have said it wrong, typed it wrong, all of that. I don't know what happens if you type the clear typo into your web browser. I don't know. I've been afraid to look. Right. I've also joked about if I ever brave enough to find out if that's a registered domain. If it's not, getting it anyways to have it redirect. I've thought about that.
I mean... I mean, at this point, you should make dick-shaped dice.
I could, and people have asked me about that too, but I feel like it's one of those things that, there are other dice makers who dick dice so well, and, I don't need to be good at everything. Name. That's true. That's very true. So it does feel very appropriate.
It does. And I mean, honestly, I would be more likely to go to a company named Long Dog Dice for dick dice than I would... I don't know, any other dice company that doesn't have a name that implies there's a dong involved.
You know what? I'll add it to my R&D list for the year, so.
There you go. And you know what? You just make the D20 has to have a gold dick.
Oh, 100%.
Right.
It's this way if you're going to do it, you got to do it.
Right. And this way you get your Critical Role reference in there. And, Of course, that makes it sound like the D20 is going to be affixed to your hand. I almost said sticky, and then I was like, well, it could be,
No.
Not from the resin, though.
Yes, not from the resin.
Well, this went off the rails immediately.
Which, you know what? I feel like I'm here for that energy. So
Good.
Let's just... The rails are a suggestion, and we can just abandon them.
I don't even think they're there. They weren't in the beginning. Yeah. I love it. Anyhow. So how long have you been doing this, by the way? I didn't ask beforehand.
I've been making dice for about 5 years now. There's a very loud plane going overhead. Sorry if you can hear that.
That's okay.
We
all know life happens in this podcast, I hope.
Exactly, yeah.
They hear my cat, the doorbell ringing, I burp occasionally,
Oh, I love this. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So this is what we got. So yeah, I'm not worried about the plane anymore.
Yeah.
But I've been doing dice for about 5 years. I kind of started it out of it was a spite project. I got some dice that were from a mass manufacturer kind of thing.
Right.
And
they were shitty.
They showed up and I was like, these are not like the pictures at all. I could make stuff better than this. And then about 20 minutes later, my I can do anything gene kicked in. Right. And I was going, well, it's plastic. That's resin. You can get resin at a hobby store. That's got to be a thing you can do, right? And that's how I got introduced to the world of the fact that yes, people do hand make dice. So that's how I started it. Was just kind of being upset about a thing I bought and going, I will spend so much more money figuring out how to do it myself now.
Right? How long does it take you to make a set of dice?
The hands-on time kind of ranges a little bit for some of the fancier ones that I need to do multiple castings for and things like that. It's I go anywhere between 6 and 10 hours depending on a thing, just because I am still... It's most of that time is in the sanding and polishing. A single set of dice has 70 faces. So that's a lot to inspect. And when you've got a brand new mold, you don't necessarily need to sand and polish every single face, but as the molds wear out, you start needing to do it more. And I have a problem where I go, the mold's still good, I don't need to throw it out and make a new one yet. And so I use it way longer than I should, and ultimately create a lot more work for myself in the end.
Gotcha.
I'm trying to be better about it, but it's a hard. The materials are expensive, so it's hard to be like, if I throw out this mold, I need to use more silicone to do this thing. So I want to try to eke as much out of it as I can, and it can catch up on you pretty quickly. But
Right.
yeah, hands-on is like between 6 hours or 10 hours, depending on what I'm doing. But like that's spread out over the course of like a month. Because I do live down in Texas, and it is very hot and very humid here a lot, and both of those things can impact how the resin cures. And if you try to sand something before it's fully cured, you end up scratching it more than making it shiny. So I'll pour things, and then after I pull it out of the mold, they go in a special little bin where I'm like, you're going to sit there and you're going to cure. My resin says it only needs 72 hours. You're going to sit there for like 2 weeks just to be real sure. And then I do
Right.
my little fingernail dent test. It's like, no, you're good. Okay, now we can start working on things. And I probably could do it faster than like the month, but I kind of tend to do things in batches. I'll
Right.
be like, I'm gonna sit down. I'm gonna spend a couple days sanding. And now that I'm sanding, I've gone through all these grits. It's like, now I'm gonna start doing like the polish with the Dremel. And now I'm gonna go do inking for like all of these sets all at once. If I was just like, I have a set I need to crank out, it's probably closer to like 2 weeks. But I tend to try to be like, I'm making this specific kind of mess today, and only that kind of mess. And then we'll clean that up and go to the next kind of mess.
Right. Right. So how long does an average mold last? How many sets does it make?
I tend to try to get like, I can usually get about like 10 sets out of a mold before I really need to throw it away. I probably should be closer to like 7 or 8. The D10 and D% molds always die the fastest on me. Those have like kind of the sharpest angles of like
Right.
needing to pull apart the mold to be able to get them out. The D20 molds last the longest. I guess the D4 mold lasts the longest because there's no bending to get things out of that. But D20 is shortly behind that. So I'm replacing the D10 molds more often than anything else, which is part of the reason why I know some people do what they call slab molds, where there's one just like big mold that has all 7 or 8 or whatever of their dice in that single mold.
Mhm.
I do all my molds individually. Like I have this mold is for a single D6 and this one's for a single D8 and whatnot. So that way then like as those individual ones die, I'm not in a weird position of I have to throw out a whole mold and do the whole set thing all over again. I just have an army of individual ones, which also makes it easier if somebody asks me like, can you make a D10 set for like my Scion game? Yes, I can make you a bunch of D10s. I don't have to make a special mold for it. I already just have a whole bunch. Let's go.
Nice.
So dual purpose choice.
Right. Do you make your own molds or do you have to buy them?
Yeah, I make my own molds. I have a resin printer, so I've made my own. Let me give credit where credit is due. I go to my husband and I go, "Can you please print my masters for me?" I have new things I would like to do because he is the. I want to learn how to use the resin printer at some point. I'm going to, but he just has that knowledge right now. So I'm like, "Can you do the thing for the time being?" and at some point we'll sit down and you can start showing me things, but like he's gotten very, very good at it. So he prints my masters, but from there I will sand and polish those, make my molds, and then pour from those. So I fully do this process myself, start to finish. Is print my masters, make my molds, pour from that, replace the molds as needed. It's also much easier to make my own molds that when they do start to die, I don't have to worry about, okay, let's go to this supplier over here and order molds and hope they show up in time. And like, I have so much control over that whole process that it is, I find it easier to be predictable about how things are gonna go when I know that, oh, I need this thing, and I can go downstairs right now and go, oh shoot, you know what, I need some more D6s, and I can just do that tonight and have them tomorrow. So ultimately having direct control over more parts of the process, I feel like is always more beneficial for a variety of reasons.
Right. Is there a particular set that you've made that people would most know you by, or like a type of dice, or what sets you apart from the others?
I would say the one set that I don't get to make very often because it is difficult, but it was one of, I think, the first one that I ever posted about that like took off. It's also the only one where I've had the pictures lifted for fake listings on things like Temu and Wish. It's the only one of my photos that's ever been stolen. Is a set that I called Color Spray, and it's all like neon glitters all swirled together. And so it's across the full set, you get all of the colors. You have like pink, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple, but like each individual die will only have 2 or 3 of those. So every time I pour that set, it is different, but it's still recognizable as like that theme.
Gotcha.
But working with things that anybody who's done resin knows that when you start putting too much glitter into a thing, and I know on the one hand no such thing as too much glitter, but on the other hand, as far as resin density capacity is concerned, if you put too much glitter into it, you start having issues with as you start sanding and polishing the surface of that die, if those glitter pieces like start to give you an uneven surface and become exposed and whatnot, and then you have a whole thing and a whole adventure of trying to not have a surface that looks like it's just dimpled and pockmarked. So dealing with that and finding the right kind of ratios for things has been an adventure, because I started making those before people really were using like dice blanks where you could make something and then encase it in a clear, and so that way you didn't have to worry about that kind of stuff. So like this is a thing I do without blanks. It is color all the way to the edges, and it's one of my favorites, and it's been probably one of my most popular things. And I would say the second most popular one was a series I did that I called The Void, and they were black on black dice, like very intentionally. I know that's not everybody's aesthetic. Some people want very clearly contrasted numbers, but sometimes you just got to do things for the vibe.
Right.
And they were shiny black with matte black numbers, and then had colored bits of foil all around their surface, so they like looked like they were glowing a little bit with that color. And I did a whole series of those with 12 different foil colors, and that was one of the few times I had done a pre-order thing and like sold out of everything I had already made and all the pre-orders like within minutes, and I still get people asking me about those. So I would say those are probably my 2 biggest ones. And then my personal favorite is a set that I call Mass Heal, because again, I'm bad at naming things. So I make a set, and then I go looking through spell and ability lists, and I go, what does this feel like? And the Mass Heal is my personal favorite, and is one of the few ones that I've actually kept for myself. Of the hundreds of dice sets that I've made, I've only kept 2 that I didn't intend to keep when I made them. Like I've made myself character dice sets, and I was like, I'm clearly keeping this. I'm making this for my little wizard. I'm doing this for this reason. And this was one of the few ones that I made just like on a whim, just to see what the colors would do. And they popped out, and I went, well, this one's mine, so I guess I have to do this again now.
Right. So I would be making myself so much dice.
It's the reason I ended up starting to sell things, because I was like, at some point my husband's going to divorce me if I start keeping all of the experiments I've done. There's a lot of dice in this house all of a sudden. Okay. Well, how do we manage this?
How many sets do you have that are yours?
That are mine at this point? I've kept, let's see. I kept the very first one I ever made. And then my original character dice, I did a remake of that character after I had spent a couple years getting better at dice casting. Mm-hmm. There's my wizard and her surprise alter ego, and Mass Heal and Void. So I think I've kept 7 sets that I have made for myself, and 2 of those were oops, didn't mean for this to be mine, but it is now. Right. And the other 5 were intentional. So yeah, I only have 7 of mine right now.
How many sets do you have that are someone else made?
Goodness, so many. I actually have I have a beautiful little dice chest actually on my desk right here from that I bought from Sun Shadow, and that has a couple Dispel sets in it, but it also has things from Greenleaf Geek, and
nice. Yeah,
I have an Evergreen Burrow, and a Firebolt dice set, Delvewood. I recently got my Delvewood set, and they're so beautiful, and I love the work that they do. Mm-hmm. Gosh, who else is in my collection? I have more from other dice makers than I do of my own stuff, like 100%.
Gotcha.
And I love that, because so many of them do things that I don't do, or do it in a very different way. And so that's one of the things I love about a lot of the dice making world, is that even if we're all kind of working from roughly the same materials and roughly the same techniques, is everyone has such a different spin on that you could all go into something with the intent of doing the same thing, but it's not going to look the same, and you're going to very clearly see those differences and be like, oh, like this one is clearly from a different dice maker, like this is from this person, this is from this person. Or at least all of us, I know a lot of us can like identify those things within each other, or just be able to tell like these came from two different people, just because we all kind of like work with things in different ways, and it's super fun, and what I think makes the art form super interesting, and also why I think so many of us are so willing to share a lot of the information of like what we do and how we do it, because we know even if you give someone the recipe, if I give you a chocolate chip cookie recipe and we both make it, our cookies are going to be different, you know, at the end of it. So everyone's got their own flavor and flair, and it's very cool. But yeah, there's definitely that chest I have is full, and then I also have several dice boxes from Staff and Branch, and those have collections in them. So there's many dice, there's many handmade dice in here. And then I do also have a dice bag full of like my random like Chessex and whatever. You know, I have those as well. Because, you know, all dice are good dice.
Right. Well,
yeah.
Yeah.
It's not the dice's fault.
No.
It's like, you know, it's like the kid, you know, you might be a product of your parents, but you're not, I'm not going to hold your parents' sins against you. I'll phrase it like that.
All right. So this does make me want to ask, or at least talk about, not really ask, because I already know the answer to it. Let's talk about that stupid fucking question you get a lot is, are these dice balanced?
You said that question you get a lot, and instantly every muscle in my body like contracted. I was ready for it.
Yup.
The balance question is one of those things, like, it causes such a visceral reaction, and understandably, because so many people ask it not with a genuine curiosity, but because they're trying to use it as a gotcha. So I feel bad when I do find out someone was genuinely like, I don't understand how handmade dice are, like, how that's a thing, how do you know it's balanced? And I feel awful when it's like, oh, you were actually trying to ask a legitimate question. Right. Because so many people aren't. It's the easy answer to how do you know they're balanced is like, they are at least as balanced as any of your commercially made stuff from any of your big mass-produced dice manufacturers like Chessex and whatever.
Right.
They're going to be like that. I would dare argue anecdotally that handmade dice are going to likely be more balanced because we are paying attention to and handling every single one of those 70 faces in a dice set. We did not use injection molding, which is an imperfect process where things melt at different rates and catch air pockets. We did not throw them into a giant like cement mixer of a tumbler to just like fall around until flashing edges come off. Like, we are paying attention to literally every spot on it. And I have watched so many dice makers, myself included, obsess over parts of it that genuinely probably don't actually matter, to try to make it look the best it can, and just be like, oh, like there's this one little like this tiny little bump in like the paint because there must have been like some goop in it or something, and like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do about that? And it's like, Chessex ain't doing that. Ours, you know, we're paying attention to all those things. You're the only like truly perfectly balanced dice are the things that are made for Vegas so specifically under strict controls, and like those dice literally get thrown away after 20 minutes because your hand oils change how they like change the balance on them.
Yes.
Your D&D game cannot be so high stakes that you need to be that worried about whether it's Vegas quality dice. And to that end, so much more about your quote unquote balance is rooted in how you roll it and the surface you're rolling it on than the dice itself. So, like, you can take your precious saltwater test and
shove it up your ass.
Yeah. It's like that that only tells you so much. It doesn't tell you anything about the geometry of it. It's like there's so many factors. There's so many factors. And I promise your game of mass hallucination that you're playing with your friends is going to be fine. It's going to be fine. I actually had somebody ask me if I could intentionally weight some dice as like a joke. It's actually hard to intentionally mess it up. Like it's because it's still like a D20 is so round that it's like I can get it to look kind of land approximately the same face up most of the time, but that's part of why the numbers are arranged the way they are, is that like, yeah, I could try to weight it so that way the 20 is always going to show up, but it's going to be a little bit off, so you're just as likely to get the 20 as you are the 2 or the 8 that's next to it. It's fine. Your game of make-believe is going to be okay. And like, I understand that like, these games are very like personal and emotional, and I'm not trying to make light of that because I've definitely cried over so many tabletop games. But like it is ultimately a storytelling exercise with people you like to spend time with. I don't think you need to be that worried about whether somebody's cheating with their handmade dice.
Right. You know, and the other thing is that even if you had a weighted die, it still isn't going to land on a 20 every single time.
Yeah.
Like that's not how that works anyhow. And take all of your dice, roll all the 20s 100 times, and tell me your probability. Like it's still going to be the same. It depends on what you're rolling it on and how you roll it. And the other thing is like, I don't think people realize just how anything suspended in resin, it's so minuscule a weight difference. Even if it was, that it's still not going to be in your favor.
That's one of my favorite things is like so many when people are like, oh, all that glitter has to be like throwing off. It's like, hey, spoiler, resin is plastic, glitter's also plastic. It's more just plastic in plastic. And on the one people are like, oh, but it's all sunk to the one side. It's like, yes, because in liquid form, your ice floats in water. It does not mean ice is not also water. And as soon as that ice melts and also becomes water, it becomes the same state of matter, that water all mixes. Your water doesn't have different densities anymore. And it's like that for dice. When you see something where like, oh, all the glitter has sunk to one side, it's because the solid glitter more dense than the liquid resin. The liquid resin stops being a liquid at some point. It's all solid plastic now. You're good. It's totally fine. It's like that's why things sink to a side. Visually, are you like, oh, I wish it was throughout it? Yes. Actual scientifically, densitily, that's a word now. I said it. Write it down. It's pretty much the same thing. And and anything that's not going to be exactly the same is going to be such a minuscule thing. And there's so many of us who, a lot of the inclusions we make, we will do also out of resin, like out of like 3D printers and stuff. So it's just other resin in resin. It is truly all the same thing. So there's that. The liquid cores, when people are like, oh, well, that has to be throwing it off. It's like, yeah, because you're fighting fluid dynamics. That's not a balance thing. That is a class that I had to take more than once. Like, fluid dynamics are wild. So you're fighting a different problem. It's probably the most balanced thing because so much of its weight is going to move independently from what you're doing.
Right. Oh, yeah. I had, so for a short time, I was the steward of Tabletop Loot and sold dice. And I had somebody try and put a review up telling me that the ink swirled dice were unbalanced. And I was like,
angry.
Right. Ink. With okay. You know what? And the funny thing is, so the person they put the review up, and all reviews are always held for to be checked first because, you know, spammers. I don't need a review trying to direct everybody to some get rich quick scheme. But
gotta keep those for yourself.
Right, exactly. I had no record that this person actually bought any dice. So I was, you know, like, I'm not posting something up here. I don't know if you're a random person just being a dick. So they sent it again with the line basically like, oh, being that you didn't put my first one up, I now know there's something wrong.
Oh my god.
And I was like, okay, I don't know who you are, but like it's ink. Like it's lighter than resin. Even if it is all on one side, it can't unbalance the die. It's lighter than resin. Like all right.
Sometimes people confuse me in new and interesting ways. And I feel like if I read that comment, I would have been able to add that one to that list.
Right. I was just I could have understood maybe any of the other inclusion dice, but ink.
Yeah, of all the things you're gonna go for, that's an interesting choice.
Right.
Certainly.
Right. So I was like, all right, well, yeah. So let's talk about the dice community.
Mm-hmm.
One, because so when you're not in the dice community, but you are still in the tabletop community, we hear so many lovely things about the dice community. One, you all hate each other, or one, you all love each other. Yeah.
I'm on team a lot of us love each other. I feel like there's a number of people I've been able to have conversations with from specifically the dice making side of things who believe the same thing that I do, which is that the art form as a whole is better when everyone has the tools and knowledge to do their best work.
Right.
And there's so many of us who are like not able to fully teach someone from scratch how to make dice, like, because that is such a long involved thing, and there's already great resources for that on YouTube and whatnot, and people that we learn from through that avenue that like will direct you over there. But once you kind of figure out what you're doing, if you have specific questions about like, hey, how did you get this kind of look, or do you mind telling me what brand of resin dyes you use or anything like that, most of us are super willing to share that information, because like I would rather know that like you have the option of working with the same tools that I have, because you're going to come up with something cool and different, or use it in a way that I haven't thought to, or haven't been able to make work, or can't, or just like don't want to, because I don't need to be good at all of the different types of things. And we're so willing to like help each other out however we can with that kind of information. There was a resin a lot of us used that became hard to get a hold of very suddenly all at the same time, and so we were all kind of testing different ones to crowdsource the information of like, hey, if you're trying to find a replacement for this, I tried this one, it was good in these ways and not in these ways, or like this seemed like a good direct replacement, don't spend your time on this one, it's too thin to do the same kind of things you were doing. Like we were working together to find alternatives. And I love that about the community. There are, as in any community, bad actors in it who have decided that the only way they can do well is if someone else is doing poorly, and very much view the entire thing as a competition. And there are people who are like that, and I feel like you can tell who those people are by the ones who say the dice making community does not like each other. It's right. Like, no, turns out we just don't like you because you've been kind of a dick. So we're gonna, like, if you want to stop being like that, we're happy to have you be in a conversation. But if you're gonna like act like that, we can't help you, and we don't necessarily want to. If you're intentionally stepping on people, and intentionally trying to like gatekeep specific information and like who your suppliers are for things, it's like we'll figure it out. We'll get there eventually. You didn't have to be rude. So yeah, I think a lot of us get along really well and are happy to help each other, and we'll reach out to each other out of the blue and just be like, hey, you posted this picture of these dice and like they're very pretty, and I'm just wondering like what, it's like, that looks like it's, and we usually can tell like some basic things about it. It's like, okay, look, this looks like it was like one of the color shifting micas. Like, where do you get your color shift powder from? Because I don't think I've seen that kind of shade, and I would love to play with that. It's like, oh yeah, here you go. Some of us will just straight up just send links to each other, and it's like, this is exactly what I get over here. And I really like that about this community. It can feel very daunting, especially because there are some of us who have been around for a little bit longer as far as like handmade dice are a relatively new thing in just like the grand scheme of the age of tabletop communities and things like that. And so there's some people who started just in the last like year or two who don't feel like they can message somebody who's been doing it for 5 to 10 years. And it's like, no, it's like, absolutely. Like I will send you the YouTube playlists of how I learned how to do stuff. I will send you the links to the materials that I use. And if you've got a specific question about like why this thing, how I do this thing, I'm happy to tell you that I don't actually super like I learned this from this tutorial. Go listen to them, not my version of it.
Right. So do you feel that the community is oversaturated? Was it mostly during the pandemic? Is it dying down? And like, where do you feel it is?
It's weird because I don't feel like it's oversaturated in that everyone's kind of doing their own take on things, and like different people are innovating different kind of techniques for things and how they'll do stuff, and I think we all learn from that. So it's like I don't think it's oversaturated in that. I do feel like there's definitely certainly I English so good sometimes.
I mean diversity. What did you say before?
Diversity, densitility, something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
I don't even remember.
You're just Shakespeare.
Yes, absolutely.
Inventing words as we go along. Perfect. Keep going.
Yeah, I mean, all words are made up. So really,
Exactly.
I'm just on the innovative.
You are ahead
innovation
of your
front
time.
line. 100%. I have a friend who is a legit writer, and when she listens to this, she's going to be so upset, and it's going to be funny, and I can't wait. But as far as the quote unquote oversaturation, it's definitely when you're trying to be trying to be seen in the space, there's definitely a higher noise floor to get over. Right. Than there used to be. It was much easier to just, if you search for handmade dice, you would get X number of results. And now there's just so many more. So I feel like it is harder to find your artistic voice to stand out and to have people be able to find you. I feel like a lot more of us at this point we have our established audiences, and those people know where to find us, but trying to get new people in has become increasingly difficult just because there are so many more people to look at. And the other just simple fact of it too is that the people who were into handmade dice had fewer choices of people to work with and view and whatnot, and now there were more, and maybe they were following me because I was what they knew, but there's somebody else who does the thing they like better, so they're going to go over there, and that's fine and valid and good, and they should be doing that, because they should be, if you're going to spend the money on handmade dice, you should be getting something that speaks to you and what it is that you want out of that. So I don't think it's oversaturated. I think there's more options that people didn't have before, and we all just have to try to find new ways to level set our own expectations, and also find new ways to start finding some of the audiences and potential new customers and whatever who might like our work, who just have more to look through to find that.
Yeah. So you briefly touched on it, but I'm really curious. So again, from the outside perspective, there's a lot of us that don't make dice and watch some of the controversy that does happen with the quote-unquote stealing of designs. And for us, we're like, how do you steal glitter in resin?
Yeah.
You know?
There are some people who have a very specific, very cool style. I think you can't really steal a design of like, I made clear dice and I did like purple swirly smoke stuff in it. And I own that concept. You do not own a color. Other people can do that and should do that and do other cool things with it. There's that basic level of stuff, or even like the Void set series that I did, where it was black on black with these other color foil things. It's like there are other people who are going to do that, and have done that and should do that, and like that's fine because we all kind of have like different shapes and different fonts, and somebody else did like a matte version, and like I didn't make matte ones, I made shiny ones. Like you can do something with it and you can look at it and be like, oh well, I feel like that person did it first, and it's like maybe right. But again, like nobody owns color, but there are some things that are so specific, and I'm trying to think of the correct name for the individual I'm thinking of right now, but there is somebody who has made these very cool dice that have like a galaxy swirl kind of thing with a little pearl sitting in it.
Yeah.
That's so specific. That's so specific that when that starts showing up on some of the other like mass produced, I don't want to say mass produced. There are some individuals and companies who present themselves as being artisans and makers who it's like, oh, I actually know exactly which factory you went to with that picture for them to start making that for you. And so it's like, okay, well now that feels kind of gross because like you have like, this was truly a unique thing that this person was known for. So there's some things I feel like you can steal. If somebody else started making glitter neon swirl dice like my color spray things, I would be sad, but I do not own neon glitter. That's, other people are going to do it. So there are some things that I feel like if you see a picture of some dice, you go, oh, that came from this person. Mm-hmm. And then you find out it didn't. I think that's your big flag. If you look at clear dice with purple in it and you're like, that could have come from anybody, but I really like how they did it, that's fine. It gets kind of weird. I am fortunate that I don't think I've had anything so uniquely specific to me that I've seen something else pop up and felt icky about it. I'm sure it'll happen at some point. Or maybe it won't. Maybe I'm not creative enough to come up with something that somebody wants to try to recreate. I don't know.
No, maybe you're coming up with something so complicated that they don't.
Yeah, so there's been a couple times where I've been like, that's icky. I think it is worse when there's things that aren't necessarily even a specific design, but it's like, hey, if my color spray neon glitter, neon throw up party like became a set of dice that suddenly started appearing like on Temu or through some particular Etsy shops that I'm not going to name, but definitely seem to be more common in ripping off designs and things like that and mass producing them. I think I would be upset seeing it come out of a factory if I see another handmade person be like, look how I figured out how to do it. It's like, go you, because this is hard. And so like, I'm proud of you for figuring that out and finding that skill.
Right. Yeah, from the outside, it just looks really strange.
Yeah, I can see that. There are sometimes I've seen the argument start where even I feel like some of them have been strange from like, again, you don't own that concept. Right. I think I've really only seen one that I have felt legitimate about, where it's like, no, that you got ripped off. Like someone copied your design and that's upsetting. Most of the time it's just like, okay, I understand that maybe this particular color combination like means something to you because it represented something, and so you feel icky about somebody else doing it, but none of us there's only, I think I saw that there's literally only 2 places in the world that actually like produce like mica powder pigments. Everything that you get from any other supplier ultimately came from just one of these 2 places, and it's like, yeah, we're all ultimately working with the same stuff. Like you don't, and there's hundreds and thousands of options for them, and they're all like a little bit different, but they're kind of functionally the same. So it's like you're gonna have overlap, and it's also kind of the idea of like there are no original ideas when it comes to like writing and plots and whatever. Like at some point, like somebody's probably had the same kind of thought. So even if I never saw your dice, I might just have gone, hey, I think these colors would look cool together. Let me try it. Oh, that does actually look similar to something you've done before. I didn't intentionally copy it. There are finite things to do.
Right. Yeah, this was years ago. I was laughing so hard over the argument, and I felt really bad, but kind of not. I will just say that at the time there was a fledgling dice maker. I actually don't know if they continued afterwards. But they were newer at it, and apparently they felt that they had made such a unique design, and then immediately was like, they stole my design, and they posted pictures of it, and the comments in this thread were gold. Absolute gold. Like, there were so many people, I mean, put Reddit to shame in the comment section, let me tell you. They were just like, it's a swirl.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, man, you all are brutal. But it was funny because, you know, again, like, when you're not the person making it, you don't necessarily see all the things that are different or why someone would feel like their specific purple swirl was stolen. But also at the same time, it's like, yeah, but I mean, again, there's a lot of dice makers, you know, you're like, even if you're only 20 of you, you're still limited on how many different things you're going to be able to do, especially when this really started picking up quite a few years ago. I am friends with numerous people who make stuff in the tabletop industry, and it is so funny to hear everyone like, oh my god, I invented this dice holder. It's a box. It's a wooden box. Like, I don't want to be mean. It's a wooden box. You didn't invent it. You didn't invent the box. I hate to break this to you. But yeah. But I understand, like, you know, the feeling of, like, I was the first one in the industry to do this specifically for this. And you may not have ever seen anything else like it, but it's still a box.
Yeah.
And you know that they exist.
It's interesting because I've seen so many of those quote unquote controversies. Calling it a controversy feels like I'm giving it too much weight, but go with it.
Yeah.
I've seen enough of those things that there have been some dice that have been posted. Somebody's like, look at this thing I made. I'm like, that looks really cool. I would love to try to do something like that. If I do that, am I going to become the main character of social media for the day because I stole this concept? And it's like, I don't, in theory, not. Like, it's a thing that, like, I see multiple people doing. I spent so long not starting to try to make the geode dice because I was so concerned that somebody's gonna be like, oh, well, I started doing it first, and so you're just ripping that off of me, even though, like, at this point, so many dice makers are doing it, and we're doing it in different ways with different looks and things like that. And, like, that's part of the beautiful part of the innovation of this kind of this space in the industry, is that somebody kind of figured out how to do a thing that we didn't all know was possible, and now it's like, oh, well, something like that is actually possible. How can I try to make that mine and do a cool different thing with it? And it's so hard to see a cool thing and be like, well, I want to do that, but I don't want to upset that person because they think they invented a thing, and I don't want to upset a bunch of people if they all feel like it's just copying the trend or whatever. But it gets, you can get in your own head very easily about it. Which is, I think, the other thing of why when somebody's asked me how I've done a thing, I'm so willing to share it, not just for the idea of going, hey, here's how to do it if you want to do it, but also making it clear, like, I'm not going to come at you for doing the thing. Right. Because I think it'll be cool to see what you do with it. And like, I made some what I called, like, dragon skin dice, where I was able to make it like a cool kind of like bubbly texture that by the time I encased it in more resin kind of looked like lizard skin. And I had people at a convention I was at recently, and then some other people just reach out via DMs being like, how did you do that? I was like, here you go, here's my step-by-step, go forth and make cool things. And you know, because I want to see what they're going to do with it, because they have access to different pigments and colors and whatever, but they also have just access to a different way of thinking, and so I want to see what they will also come up with to do it. And
yeah,
I feel like it's the fun part.
it's also one of the reasons why, like, I have tons of artists and stuff that come on here with me, and we all kind of laugh about it, but we can always tell when somebody has just kind of joined the space because they covet their art so tightly. And it's like, I hate to tell you this, but like, even if somebody made something similar, hopefully they're going to make it all in their own style, because if you come to me with a map that looks exactly like mine, then you're not standing out. You're not going to make any, like, it's, aside from the fact of, like, everyone else who knows that it's not me who drew it are going to be like, why are you just ripping off Devin Rue?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you won't stand out anymore. So
Exactly.
like, even if you use the same software I do, I hate to use that as a example because I draw everything. I don't use brushes the way most people perceive digital artists use them, so that's probably not a good way of explaining it, but I don't know how else. But even if you used all the same software, all those same brushes, everything else, make it your own. That is how you're going to stand out. That is how you're going to actually make a living doing this. So I don't mind putting my cartography class available. Like, I'll show you how I made maps. I'll show you how I draw them. I recommend you finding, and I even state it in all the videos of my cartography class, like, make it your own.
Yes, absolutely.
If you want to do this for a living and you're here to learn how I made my maps, that's great. I'll even show you how I draw them. But I'm going to recommend that you find your own style, you do your own thing. You will stand out, especially now with social media the way it is.
Absolutely. I feel like it's, I have repeatedly been like, I'm going to learn how to draw, and I know it just needs practice, but my brain will not let me do it, and eventually I had to just accept it. Like, at some point, I have enough other skills that other people can be good at drawing. I will go be good at other stuff, and I will just throw money at them to draw things for me. Right. I feel like that's a better use of everyone's time. But also, like, when I've seen so many recommendations, it's like, hey, when you're starting to learn how to draw, like, don't like trace someone else's stuff, but like using someone else's work as like a starting point to try to learn how anatomy and all that stuff goes. It's like, don't sell that, don't do just that, but use that to help you figure out the basics, so that way you could start coming up with your own voice to things.
Right.
I feel like that applies to so many mediums, and dice included. So I fully get being so proud of a thing that you're like, I want to hold on to this so dearly, and if anybody does something similar, I'm going to get really upset about it, and they copied me. But I think at some point, at least for me, coming to recognize, hey, this is how people learn, and they're not doing it, they're not doing the same thing that you did maliciously, and trying to assume the positive intent of like, hey, they saw a thing that thought was cool enough, they wanted to see if they could do it too. Right. And now that they know they can expand on that and go do that. Now, if there's somebody who's like constantly making the exact same things you are, maybe at some point you start going, yes, okay, but I've never seen that happen. And to go back, this has been driving me crazy because I want to give credit where it is due. Dice Witchery is the dice maker I was thinking of that does the cool little pearl design. That was the one that like everyone knew that was their thing, and it started being kind of copied by some other people. Dice Witchery makes some very cool stuff. Also does makes really cute little like otter dice. These beautiful, cute little adorable otters that are hand painted and put into the dice. Wonderful. You should go check them out too. So I wanted to make sure that was covered, that they were the pearl maker I was thinking of.
Right. Yeah, no. And to kind of explain to anyone who, so because we get this argument, if you're not an artist and you don't draw, paint, or whatever, the argument we're currently having with AI is, oh, well, you've studied masters or artists that came before you. What's the difference between training AI? Because they don't get compensated either. The difference is, obviously AI is literally collaging already existing art together to make a different image. But it is using already created art. It's not there's a difference between studying a master, and the reason that we study masters to begin with is because specific paint combinations and brush strokes and the way that you literally are physically painting something can inform how they created the image they did. And it teaches you how you can make something look very lifelike, or how to create something super smooth, or how to get something that looks like it's glowing. You're not copying it. And even if you are attempting to reproduce it, you are doing it purely as a study to begin with. You hopefully are not selling your study of someone else's painting. You're merely trying to learn from it. AI is selling.
Yeah.
So,
AI is just like micro tracing is the best way. It's just, it took a bunch of other images and traced the parts that it liked and put them together into something else. I'm so fortunate that the art form I have chosen is a literal physical thing, and I don't have to worry about AI coming for my dice. I'm furious on all like drawn, illustrative, anybody in that realm. I am furious on your behalf, because like it's even I know when I've tried to learn how to draw, if I'm trying to use somebody else's work to learn from, that is purely to learn from it. If you're just popping stuff out of an AI generator, like, you're not learning anything. You have viewed art as purely as a product and not as an expression, and so you have missed the point entirely.
right? Oh, we could absolutely go on about that. And again, I don't actually have a problem with AI. I have a problem that it's being used in an unethical way. There are a bunch of people who are creating something, taking years to learn how to create, and having that art stolen, ripped apart, and then reassembled with other art into like a collage, lack of a better way of saying it, because I can't really claim that it's art.
Yeah.
But the point is, like, there's a lot of us who absolutely would have, if there had been a website that said, hey, we will pay you X amount of dollars to submit your art for our computer to learn how to create this, would you sign up? I know a lot of people that would have said yes.
Interesting.
Because there is, especially for a lot of us, first off, looking at AI art, you can almost tell that it's AI art. You know that it's going to take a while anyhow. But there's so many of us that make like stock art. It's just like, we do tons of portrait. Well, not we, because I don't do portraits. But they do lots of portraits. They have stock art that you can use in tabletop space. They do it for book covers. They do it. And we sell them on things like iStock and God, I can't remember the name of the other one. But we sell very generic art that anyone could use for other projects. And a lot of times we sell them fairly inexpensively, simply because it's something that, we've already done. We're not going to use it for anything else. It's not quite what it's not an exclusive piece or whatever. And I don't think that necessarily, because you're still paying for things like Midjourney and stuff. So you're still paying towards it. If Midjourney said, okay, well then if the more art you put into it, you'll get X amount of dollars out of it. Or like, if there was a way that we're being compensated for it, I think there'd be way more people being okay with it, as long as that was the only art that was being used to train.
Yeah.
But right now, it's not. And like, there was somebody, and this isn't even AI, this is an artist painted somebody's photograph that they took and recreated it on a canvas. and they lost a lawsuit that the photographer, because they're a professional photographer.
Oh, I saw this one. Yes.
And I am 100% behind that, because if you are the original creator of the piece, whether it's photography, illustration, whatever, and somebody else uses it and literally replicates it,
Yeah.
and didn't even credit the photographer, but didn't ask, didn't, compensate him or anything, yeah, that's wrong.
Absolutely. 100%. There's
Right.
Copying is copying, and whether you've copied just a small bit of it or literally the entire thing, I can't imagine the thought process that went into going, this is fine to do.
Right. And if that's an issue, then AI 100% is, because it absolutely is doing the same thing. So yeah, again, it's amazing.
Yeah, especially because you have to pay for Midjourney and all that stuff. Like, hey, just pay the artist. Just pay the person to get exactly what you want.
Right.
Instead of paying this generator to get, like, a rough approximation with some extra fingers or some patterns that just kind of, like, fade away into nothing. Right. And no, stop it. Stop it. I need a rolled up newspaper or a squirt bottle full of vinegar or something just to go around to people.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have to make that a new icon for the podcast, because this is like the second or third time that we've referenced a spray bottle, so we're just gonna do that from now on.
Spray bottle of vinegar is like my favorite threat to people. Just
that's just mean.
Yeah, I was like, it's not just the spray bottle. It's also, you're gonna smell bad and it's gonna sting a little. So we're just add extra layers to it.
Yeah, let's not. I mean, unless you got a salad, then please, by all means.
Yeah.
Spray my salad. But yeah, like it's an interesting time to exist and be an artist in.
Oh yeah.
It's got its moments. And the hilarious thing is, like, there's so many people, like, I love doing this podcast. I love that the majority of people who do listen are other artists. And, like, I can hear you all collectively nodding your head when we go on rants about certain things. But it's great when I get a non-artist listener who, like, asks me it with all innocence, like, what is the harm, And it's like, oh, hold on, let me play part of the podcast that you clearly missed where this is wrong. But yeah. But, the other thing is, it all comes down to, like, give us a choice.
Exactly. Yeah, I do think there are definitely people I think there were ethical ways to approach it, and because we didn't start with that, like,
right,
it's hard to put the cork back on that bottle. So
exactly.
It's like, would I love to see a future in which there has been, like, ethical, consent-based, ways in which AI can be used in a variety of formats for writing or for art and for things like that. Yes, I would love to see that. I think so much damage has been done by bypassing that part of it, that bringing it back in to create something where that is the version of it that's out there is going to be, I think, more work than any of the tech bros with the money behind this want to actually do. I think as soon as they have to actually take any responsibility for doing the hard version of it, I think that's where this goes to die.
Oh yeah. I can't imagine how else this would play out other than either it becomes something that nobody wants to deal with other than tech bros, or it dies entirely, because there's no way that I think any artist at this point would trust, like, any company.
Yeah, it is such a large project that requires so much trust and all of that is immediately out the window. That it's like you can't go back. Like, there's always going to be the question of, like, okay, like, if I did give you consent for these things, at what point do you just go, well, you said we could do this, so we're also just going to, like, do these other things with it. And how do you track that? How do you find out? How do you hold accountability for it? And it's and legalities are so far behind technology constantly all the time that it's so much damage has been done and is going to be done before any of that gets any real kind of rule set in place.
Yeah. Anyhow, you said you do other things other than dice. What do you do?
So in my previous life, my background is actually in chemistry and physics. I have degrees in those things. And so for a while, I worked in jobs directly related to that, and then moving into things like project management and whatnot at a couple different companies before I decided I hated corporate world, and then moved from that into film for a while before the pandemic happened. That kind of changed how all of that world worked, where I did like production coordinator stuff, which is a project manager. A manager. Ooh, I'm making new words.
There you go. Speaking a different language.
Yeah. Production coordinator is essentially a project manager for creatives. That's the best way to describe it. So I did a lot of that stuff before I ended up being more fully into Dice World. But I still will do freelance project management for people. I've helped manage their Kickstarters to varying degrees, because I've known a number of people who have had a project and they're a writer on it, and they have other writers and they have artists and they have all these people lined up, and all of a sudden they go, I was good at the creative part of finding all the people, but now I need spreadsheets to manage those people and their timelines and their invoices. And that's actually a lot, it turns out. And I go, yes, it is. Let me help you. And then I make them spreadsheets, and we keep track of everything and have a single point of contact, so that way they can focus on doing what they do best. So I do project management stuff. There is also another company that I work for part-time that I actually met because of dice work. I work for Turbodork. They make metallic hobby paints for minis and stuff like that.
Right.
And I met them because I bought a bunch of their paints to use to ink the dice. And at the time that I started buying their paints, the company was just like the two people who owned it. And they emailed me and they're like, we saw your name of Long Dog Dice. You're a dice person. What are you using our paints for? We're very curious. So that's kind of like how we met, and it got to a point where they would just kind of, sometimes they'd be like, we're developing new colors. Try these, see if you like them. And they ended up they were based out in California. They ended up moving to Texas in the same area that I'm at. They were in the Austin area. And then we just started like hanging out and playing board games together while also doing business things. And eventually they were like, we kind of need some part-time help. Do you know anyone who would be interested? And I was like, I am now an artist and would be interested in some confirmed income each month if you don't think it would be weird if I worked for you. So I started working with them like a year and a half ago. And the chemistry background is certainly helpful. Making paint and doing, formulating new colors and stuff like that. And then also doing a lot of their spreadsheety and databasey kind of things. So I'm there part of the week, I'm doing dice part of the week, and then I'm usually on, peppered throughout the week on video calls with people, just kind of doing check-ins about their various projects, whether it's Kickstarter or helping out on some other smaller film projects that can't fully hire a production coordinator, because it's there are a bunch of students who are doing things. We're like, we just need someone to make sure that we haven't forgotten anything. So right. I do a lot of that too.
Wear a lot of hats.
I wear many hats, and I made a reference to it, I think maybe in our chat before we actually started recording, is that I was born with an overactive I can do that gene.
Right.
And there's been so many times where somebody's been like, hey, can you help me with this thing? And I'm like, give me 2 days to see if I feel like I can be comfortable enough with this random skill set that I do not currently have, but I'm convinced I could very quickly. So, or figuring out if there's someone who's better suited for that. That's the other thing I like to try to do, is be like, no, I can't help you, but I actually know someone who can. I think that's been the biggest boon to having worked in film for a little bit, is I, at this point, I almost know somebody for everything at this point. So I can usually direct someone somewhere more appropriate. But there was a Kickstarter I worked on where when I came into it partway into the project, they had started doing things and then went, oh, I could use some help. So they had not budgeted for me. They had not planned for how to interact with someone else, helping manage their stuff. We came up with a plan together that made everyone happy. And in the middle of this, they went, hey, so the plan I had for how we were actually like manufacturing, like how we were actually like printing this book, we're making a book. The plan I had hinged on a conversation that I had with somebody about their production capabilities, and it turns out I misunderstood a key part of, and we can't actually use them to print this book now. So can you figure out how to make a book?
Right.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can learn about book printing. Sure. So I got very well versed in like paperweights and the different like kinds of finishes and the different kinds of printing and different kinds of binding and like how to communicate to potential printers what it was we were going to need and all of that. And I learned all of that. So that's a thing I know now, because rather than going, nah, that's a you problem, you figure it out, I was like,
Right.
Sure, I can, yeah, I'll learn that. Why not? I very much have a learn it all tendency. Which may have something to do with potentially undiagnosed ADHD. I don't know. I'm not ready to confront that with myself yet. But so far, it's been pretty functional. And it does mean I have a really weird tapestry of skill sets that weave into each other. It's like, oh yes, I have taught these things, and I did neutrino research, and also I can get your book printed for you. So that's like a thing that's on your shelf. And also now I make resin dice. And also I formulate paint. And it's like, this sounds made up. All of this sounds made up.
Right. Well, not to me, because I too, I obsess. I love to learn things. If I don't know it, I absolutely need to all of a sudden, even if it's just for my own personal knowledge. I am the kind of, like, I have, when I very first started creating art, I learned because I was dating an amazing person. She is Japanese, and I was over her house, and one of her relatives was doing Japanese calligraphy painting. And I immediately was like, how do you do this? Can I learn? Can I learn? You know, like, I obsessed over it. And it's actually one of the things that really got me started in creating. And then I went from one art form to another art form to another art form, like, you know, just because I absolutely want to learn. And things that aren't necessarily art, but kind of. Food is an art.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I learned
art adjacent.
how to cook. Right. And because of that, did I work in a restaurant, a 4-star restaurant for an entire summer? Yes. Yes, I did. As a sous chef, because I absolutely needed to learn.
That is very cool. That is so cool.
And would I ever do it for a living? Fuck no. The hours are incredibly long, and it's just really stressful.
It's the other reason I stopped doing film.
Right, yeah. But I loved it because I got to learn different ways of cooking than I would have before, and I got to see it as an art form, because the chef that I worked with was just, who was also a great friend, was just amazing at it, and absolutely blew my mind with the stuff that they would do. And but I'm like that with everything, and I don't have ADHD. I can't blame anything other than I am just an incredibly imaginative and curious person who loves to learn. I don't think that I can even remotely come across something that is of slight interest to me and not devour everything I can possibly find about it. I know things I shouldn't know because I know how, like, a great example is, as a kid, my older brother decided that we were going to, I guess we watched Wizard of Oz or something. We were going to go fly away in a hot air balloon.
I think I feel like everyone had that thought at some point.
Right. So we were going to make one. And yeah, I know. We were kids. And we got like a wooden pallet, and my brother started like hammering it. That was going to be the base for a basket. And I figured out how hot air balloons work. You know, purely because we were gonna do this. We were gonna leave. So I went to the local library with my cousin and took out a bunch of books on hot air balloons. And I'm like 7 at the time. So I actually know how hot air balloons work. And it was so funny because I was like, what a weird thing to know. This is why. But apparently I've always been this way.
I love I love collecting all the random bits of knowledge because there's so many. It's weird what things pop up from time to time, and there's also, I like the idea of trying to learn so many different things because you never know what is actually going to end up resonating with you, and like how you can end up on a new path that is actually very fulfilling to things. And sometimes you just end up with random knowledge, and sometimes you end up becoming an artist, and sometimes you end up becoming a sous chef, and sometimes you just you learn enough about a thing to know that you don't actually need to know any more about it. And I think there's something valid about that too.
Like, we've made jokes that you would have thought that I would have been a professional fantasy cartographer long before I had. So my family used to own a tree service. And when I was younger, in an effort to attempt to have a better relationship with my father, I took landscape design and architecture. So I learned how to draw landscapes and how to create them, and and literally how to design entire yards, fields, golf courses, you name it, right? So, but my father's an asshole, so that didn't end up happening. But he also went out, he got like a bunch of books to become an arborist. I read his books. I got very interested in it. I learned all about trees and then, and I am a huge lover of earth sciences just because I am absolutely intrigued about how our planet and other planets as well, how they all work, and the unusual things that occur on our planet that don't, like are odd, that like we have one of a kind of, and I always thought that was really fascinating. And so when this actually came to be my career, none of my friends were even remotely like shocked. As a matter of fact, everyone was like, wow,
This makes sense. You know what? This
right.
tracks.
Like, how did this not happen sooner? I don't know. To be honest with you, I don't know. And it's not like I just started making maps. I've been making maps for years because I play D&D and I'm the DM. So I've made world maps. I've made regional maps. Never once dawned on me to put it on the internet, much less to have anyone like, can you make one for me? No. And to add to it, I used to do a lot of prop making for local theaters when I was younger, because all my friends are into theater. And because I'm always hanging around and I know how to make stuff, I started doing props. And almost specifically, or the majority of the time, I was doing like paper prop making. So those old gnarly scrolls and everything else.
Yeah.
So when I put my maps on them, again, you would have thought... I've sent these to my players. I send them like entire packages filled with all sorts of like props and stuff, and like letters and just weird stuff for our game to have fun with. And so again, you would think it would have dawned on me earlier, but I was doing other stuff, so I wasn't in need of work, so I didn't think of it. But also, everyone draws their own maps. Why would you need mine?
I think that's one of the interesting things about like the world that we live in now. There's so many things that are, and like that can be jobs right now that would have not occurred to anybody could be a job or a thing that you could sell. And it's like, it's so easy to be now. It's like, oh yes, of course. Like I can draw fantasy maps for other people and do this cartographer thing, and like post it on the internet, and like this is a thing now. And
right.
it's easy to look at and be like, oh, I could have been doing this the whole time. But it's like, who would that have occurred to? Who would that have, like, it didn't occur to me, the idea that like I could make dice. You can buy dice. Why would I need to make that?
Well, the other thing is, like, it also, it wouldn't have ever occurred to me because the internet wasn't what it is now. Because I'm old. I'm
Also
older than the
that.
internet.
Also that, yes.
Uh,
Now I'm trying to say also that, like, oh yeah, you are old. Like, but I'm not
no.
I'm not too far behind you. So like,
Yeah.
I get it. Like, the internet was a very different thing.
Right.
Not even all that long ago.
Right. Like, it's not as far back. Like, I make it sound like I'm ancient. I'm not. I'm 50. Very proud to be the age I am because, hey, some people never make it this far in life. But like when I first started doing art in my teens, the internet didn't exist. Like it wasn't an internet around the world. It was a program software at the time that essentially was a webbed data, like database. And so there was no place to like post your art for everyone to see. I used to schlep around a portfolio to tons of different places to try and get my art because I used to paint on canvas. And it was super expensive to have your artwork professionally photographed, and then put into a portfolio, and then to bring this around to a bunch of places to try and get your stuff out there, or to try and find an agent that didn't cost you a ridiculous amount of money so you could afford to have them to do that schlepping for you while you did your full-time job because there's no way to do it otherwise. So when I made my map of Skyrim, which everyone who listens to the podcast knows how that story went, and put it on the internet, it still didn't dawn on me like this is how I would get any of the work I did out to people. So even if I was making maps before then and wanted to be a professional fantasy cartographer, it still wouldn't have made any sense to me. Like, I still wouldn't dawn on me to like, oh, I'm going to post on the internet and everybody's just going to come and buy maps for me. Because again, I'm used to the schlepping everything and like putting it in front of people. And I still do. Like, because it does make you stand out. When it comes to like art and everything else, it is, well, I was going to say it's very rare, but it's not anymore. Like, I get a lot of people that now message me, but in the beginning, nobody knew who I was or knew my art and anything else. I had to put it out there in front of other people. I wasn't expecting the way that I would be known to be fan art. That was a really unexpected turn. And again, Matt Mercer knew who I was before I did the map of Tal'Dorei. It's not like me doing the fan art is what made him go, oh wow, you exist. Mm-hmm. Like, we were already friends and already talking, but I think it just opened the conversation to like, okay, by the way, if you are in need of a cartographer, you now know one. And the funny thing is, like, when we were talking, I think one of the reasons that he didn't initially didn't know that he could like commission me the way that we ended up working together was because he was like, oh yeah, I need this drawn, but I'm gonna have it, print out and put on gnarly paper and everything else. And I was like, oh no. You don't understand. I make prop maps. Like,
It's like, oh, sweetheart, no, like you could, but I have a solution that I think will elevate this to a level that you had not considered quite yet.
Right, exactly. And so when I sent it to him and everything else, and the reaction that I got was just like chef's kiss. But it was hilarious because again, he didn't know that he could get something like that. He thought he would have to be doing it all himself. And I was like, oh no, hold on. Let me completely geek out with you over this because I make actual prop maps. So, which I loved. It was great,
I think that's one of the best like examples for the argument of it never hurts to ask. Like, if you know someone who does a thing, knows a thing, whatever, say the crazy thought that you have. Say the wild thing of like, this is a thing I want to do, and maybe they can help you out. Maybe they can direct you to a better solution than what you had already considered. Maybe they can actually do it. Like, and maybe they can't, or for whatever reason. But like, the idea that Matt was just gonna go, oh, I'm gonna go this other route, and I'm gonna do this because other options were not a thing he was aware could be there. Sometimes knowing is half the battle. Just knowing what your options are, and I think so many times you're missing knowing that. Sorry. Just like knowing that you have another option available to you can like change everything.
Right.
And it's so funny how many of those things come about from just kind of offhand comments or conversations in front of the right person who can go, actually, but not the jerk version of, well, actually,
right.
Like the helpful one.
And this is why learning things beyond what you think you're going to do, or what you think you're going to learn or need in life is extremely helpful. Like, there's I've been playing with the same group for a ridiculously long amount of time. When I didn't tell anybody. My wife is the only person who knew that I had a map that was going to be revealed on the stream. But what I did do was tell my players that if they missed any other night, it can't be this particular night. So they knew something was up,
Yeah.
I also told my patrons. I was like, "Hey, you're gonna want to watch."
If you do nothing else, do this.
Right. But the hilarious thing was to have my players immediately recognize the paper that Matt pulled out for the first map and knew immediately what it was hilarious to me. Because they recognized my prop work, and I was like, oh, that is so fucking funny,
That has to feel so good too, to be like, oh, the thing I do is that recognizable.
Yes. Yeah, they didn't even see the map itself yet. They were just like, oh, I know what that is. That's one of your props. And the funny thing is, they thought that I had made a prop of something Matt drew. So when it was revealed that it was one of my drawings, they were like, oh, like
the rare double gasp, like.
Yeah. But it's so funny because for years I've made them props, and they get all excited about them, and I've made props for their theater groups and everything else. And it's so funny because the things that you don't think you'll ever use in a professional capacity like that, Yeah,
I think it's not nearly as fun, but one of my favorite stories of the very first film production I ever worked on is we were, the first production I worked on, I got that job 100% through pure good old-fashioned nepotism. It was a friend of mine was the showrunner for this thing and was the writer and director for it. And it was around the time that I had figured out that I was not cut out for the corporate world and working traditional jobs. And I was like, what do I do now?
Right.
And he goes, I feel like a lot of the things that you enjoyed about the kind of work you were doing would actually translate really well into film. Let me know if you ever want to give that a shot. And I was like, that's very kind of you. I will never try to cash that in because I would feel bad about it. But sometime later, we were living in Michigan at the time and had decided we never wanted to see snow again. So we're like, we're going to move to Texas because we had been coming down here to for events and to visit friends and had really fallen in love with her. And was like, we're gonna do this move. And I was moving ahead to see if I could get a job down here because nobody was talking to me because I wasn't already local.
Right.
So all the jobs I had applied for, they're like, no, we're gonna talk to people that are here. So I had some very lovely friends who offered up their guest room that I could live in for a couple of months while we were testing out if this was a viable move to do long term and things like that. And I'm literally in the middle of doing the drive. I'm halfway down to Texas when my friend calls me and goes, You're moving here right now, right? Yeah, surprise. I'm gonna be there on Wednesday, and he's like, cool, I'm crewing up for a show right now. Do you want to try production? You would just be a PA, probably in the production office. But if you want to try it, like, that is a legitimate offer. And I did not already have work lined up, so I said sure. So I got to Austin on a Wednesday. I met the producer on the Thursday, and the producer went, hey, he said you're on the crew, so like, this is a formality just for me to make sure that I don't hate you. You start on Monday. So I started on Monday. And so everybody just knows I'm the girl who showed up, who has never worked on a film project before, and I'm there because the showrunner put me on the crew. So people are expecting me to just like be truly the nepotism, not doing anything higher. And right. I don't know how to like half do anything. So I am like full bore learning everything I can, doing all of this. And there was a section of filming where we spent 3 weeks in the middle of the desert. Like, we were filming at a GPS location. It was not an address. We were in the middle of nowhere. The closest town was literally driving 3 hours to El Paso if you needed anything other than what you could get from your stereotypical general store. Right. Of like, the town that was closest literally had a population of 1,000 people. There was a restaurant there, and it closed at 8 p.m. and there was a general store that had very basic supplies. Everything else you had to like go somewhere. And so we're out there and we're doing a bunch of night shoots, and they run out of juice for the fog machine. And they're like, what are we going to do about this? And I speak up and I go, because like, I have a basic science, like, I have an extensive science background, but this ends up being a basic science thing that no one expected. And I was like, I'm just in like the crappy little hotel. I know if one of the people with an Airbnb can give me access to their kitchen, I can make some more. And everybody having this panic conversation, like, stops and turns to me. And they're like, what do you mean you can make some? And I was like, well, the general store has glycerin to do soap making. So it's like, I just need access to a kitchen where I can boil some stuff, and I can use like glycerin and some distilled water, and I can make more juice for the fog machine. Right. And this is when everyone turns to the showrunner and is like, where did you find her? Who is this?
Just like, go into a snowy region far, far away.
Yeah. It was just the most random crossover of skill sets. It's like, you never know when a thing you have learned is going to be relevant. And right. Just like basic chemistry thing, I stopped production from shutting down for a couple of days while they figured out how to get more fog machine juice. I was like, yeah, just give me your kitchen and like, and I'll have some in by time we start tomorrow. Like, it needs to cool down, so we can't have it tonight, but I can do that right now. And it was one of my favorite little fun stories of like, you never know what is going to pop up and in what capacity.
Right.
My favorite kind of epilogue to this is that showrunner, he got married recently, and I was at the wedding, and there was a table of us that were all from that first production. Mm-hmm. And the people who we sat down and we're all like catching up with each other and trying to remember who everybody is. And because it's been a number of years, and the one actor looks at me, he's like, oh, you're the scientist. Like, that was how he remembered me. Was right. That moment. He was like, oh, you're this one. So it was a lot of
worst
fun.
Things to be remembered as.
Exactly. Certainly. And I'm sure there's other productions where I have other adjectives, but you know, when you're the person with the spreadsheet, you know, you're bound to make some enemies because you have to tell people, no, we don't have the money for that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Good
no,
times.
I always think it's just, especially in this space, because I mean, first off, there's so many. I make the joke all the time that this is such a do-it-yourselfer kind of industry.
Oh yeah.
You know, so you would think that, like, again, this is probably why I never thought like, oh, I should sell maps, because everyone makes their own. You know, I mean, but also it's a really good example of, yeah, everyone does make their own, but you absolutely, if you have a particular style or a unique way of doing something, that's how you stand out. Absolutely. You know, like, that's how you get work.
And I feel like as we've also moved more into a capitalist hellscape where everyone needs to monetize every minute of their time, I think also right. There's a bigger recognition of, like, yes, I could do that, but is it worth me spending my time doing that instead of something else when I could pay someone else who already knows how to do that better and just like get the thing that I want? It's like, could I do it? Yes. Should I do it? Maybe not, when I'm just out here trying to survive and get all these other things done.
Exactly. You know, and to me it's really interesting how many people, because I now do consulting for cartography, and any of my patrons can come on, or you can actually hire me through my website. To sit down with people, and the biggest question that everybody asks me is, okay, so I just need to know, like, is there anything on here that like doesn't work? Like, is any of this defy physics? I mean, it's a world full of magic, you know, but they're like, yeah, but I just, like, does it break immersion? You know, and it's so interesting because it's the same questions. It's the same concerns, I should say, that so many people have as to whether or not, you know, whether their map is going to be believable. And it kind of changed the way that I started presenting the information to other people, because prior to that, again, I think I told you before we started recording, you know, when I first made my cartography course, I thought everyone was asking me how to draw the things, not what should I be drawing. And so I revised that course to show you, like, oh, this is not only can I tell you how to get that far, but I've like massively condensed world building from the beginning of your planet and made it into something that's a little bit, it's not as crunchy as earth sciences normally are. I watered it down drastically to give you like what you bare minimum need to know in order to like literally create a planet, start just, you know, figuring out where your equator is, where your fault lines are. That dictates where your continents are, that dictates your mountains and how they're created. Like I go into this whole thing without it being super complicated, or at least I hope not. But to give people like a much better understanding of what you're actually asking for when it comes to what do I put on my maps. This answers that and lets you answer it in a way that's much better. And then I get to spend the entire time talking about like what kind of cultures would then be formed in this area and why, and, you know, like, and giving ideas behind it and how, you know, to create a richer, much more interesting and more believable world history.
Knowing what question to ask somebody is a harder skill than anyone gives it credit for. Like people asking you like, oh, how do I draw this, and actually meaning like, no, like how do I make a thing that makes sense?
Right.
And it's like, and I'm sure those kind of feel like they can be the same question, but they're not, especially when you're talking to somebody who knows what they're doing with it. Like if somebody asks me, it's like, oh, how do you make dice? It's like, well, like you take molds and you mix, you know, a resin together with some pigments and pour that into the molds. And it's like, most people are not asking that. They're like, how do you get something that is like a finished product that looks good, and is like, and usually I figured out for me, a lot of people are like, how do you get it, like how do you polish it is usually what the number one thing they're actually meaning, or how did you get stuff to not sink in it. So when I do get the question of like, how do you do the thing, it's like, let's figure out what part of this you're trying to get to. What is the question behind your question?
Right.
And asking them to think a little bit more about like what is the goal here, because there's so many different answers to your question that I don't actually know which one you're looking for.
Right. Yeah, no, same, absolute same. And I do love it because I have had people that started, how do I become a professional fantasy cartographer? Oh geez. That's a loaded question. Let's start with something a little bit easier, because I don't think that's actually what you're asking.
Yeah.
You know, but I mean, like, but at the same time, it is. They absolutely, like, I want to do this for a living. You know, I get that, But I can't answer that question. One, because everyone's path is always going to be different. But also because I didn't intend to be a fantasy cartographer. Like, it happened. That's where life took me, you know?
Absolutely. Same thing for me doing the dice thing. It's like I started out of spite, and then I made some for myself, and then I made some for the people I was playing with. And then they asked me if I could make some things for the other games that they were in, and then those people saw things. And I was like, yeah, I can make some things for the other people. And I just kept kind of saying yes to stuff until all of a sudden it was like, oh no, I've said yes to a lot. I think this is a business now? How did that happen? And then I was working in film, and the pandemic settled in, and it was like, oh, well, we're not doing that for a long time. I got a lot of free time on my hands. I guess I'm just going to make a lot of dice and see if those go anywhere. And they did. And this is what I do now. It just kind of happened.
Right. Do you make anything other than dice?
I've started trying to make some things other than dice. So I've started doing some resin coasters recently, which I've been having way more fun with than I should. I'm like, it's on the one hand, it's just a coaster, but it is just a wildly different format for the resin. Like having a large flat surface lets you do things differently than if you're like casting like a denser thing.
Right.
So I've been having fun with that. And I've also had some just like unhinged concept ideas for designs for like stickers and things like that. And I am not an artist, but I am fortunate enough to know a number of very skilled artists. And so I have gone to some of my friends and been like, hey, if I said Cobalt Phoenix Wright to you, is that a thing that you feel like you could manifest into a drawing? And the artist I use for a lot of my things goes by the handle Gamma Caruchador online. And Gamma says to me, we've been friends for a while, and he's like, that's not the most unhinged thing you've ever said to me. Give me a couple days, I'm sure I could do something. So he puts up with a lot of weird messages that I send him, usually around 2 a.m., where I go, hey, was trying to sleep, can't, thought of a weird thing. So I've got some stickers and keychains, and I do the coasters, and have started have made available the housings that I use to make my molds. That can be a very wasteful process. Like a lot of people just take a cup and you glue it to some like packing tape and use that as the housing for the molds. I've got some 3D printed filament things that I use for that, and like so I like sell those things too and whatnot. Nice. So trying to cover some more ground so it's not just one very expensive dice set, and maybe hit a couple different interests for people who want something fun, but don't necessarily want to spend the money on a set of handmade dice, because I also get that's a big investment a lot of times. So
right.
Like to
how
have
much
options.
Are your sets on the average?
My base price tends to be $100 for your standard like 7-piece set. I'll do D6 sets that I want to say the 66 sets start at 50 is where I'm currently at. And then I've done D10 sets. I think 5 D10s. I'm starting around 70 for those. With the price varying based on like, do I need to double cast it because it has dice blanks, or am I using the pigment that costs $10 for a gram, and things like that. So, but generally around 100, and I work with people too if they come to me and they're like, this is something I would like to commission. I'll be like, here's different ideas, here's what those costs might kind of be, and I also always do kind of a test cast so that way they can see like this is specifically kind of what I'm thinking when I describe something to you. So I'll do like a D6 or something because that's pretty easy to bang out, and if they like that, great, then I use that as the basis for the whole set, and if they don't like it, it goes into my misfit pile, and then that's fine, and that'll find life somewhere else. But yeah, I try to cover a range of options for things.
Do you have sets on your site now that are, or do you sell out a lot?
I don't sell out as much anymore. I blame the economy and just people having more options to be able to get exactly what they want. Right. Which I say blame, that's not a correct thing there. But it's like, they don't have to come to me. They can go to other people now because other people exist. So I keep stuff in stock. Like usually I've got a wide range of pigments and materials to work with. And so sometimes I'll just go stand in front of my dice bench and I'll go, what do I feel like making, like seeing how they interact and seeing how these things look. And so I'll just make dice and I'll eventually finish them and they'll go up on the site. So there's things there, and usually there's sets. There's some, I think right now there's a 66 set that's still up there. I do some of the jumbo D20s. I'll have other single D20s that are on there, and those just kind of exist as I make them. But I've also recently added a pre-order section for some of the designs that I get asked about the most. So I have that up so that way people can be like, hey, I like this design. I want it as a Vampire the Masquerade set, or I want it as a 7-piece set, but I want the Rhombus D12, and can order exactly what combination of things they want for some of those designs that I do tend to go back and revisit some. So that is on there. And then I also have a link to a commission form. I take custom commission forms. So that way, if somebody, one of my favorite things to do is make character dice. When somebody goes, here's a description of my OC and my little hallucination baby, and right. here's art that I have from somebody else. Can you make dice for this? And that's my favorite thing to do. My absolute favorite thing to do. So I will take those as well. And the second most common question I get at this point is, what do you charge for commissions? And I charge the same thing that I do for my regular dice. I don't make you pay more just because you asked me to do it. The work takes what the work takes. And the materials cost what the materials cost, and just because I did it because you told me to versus my brain came up with it doesn't make a difference to me. So
if you draw or paint, please don't listen to that.
It is different. These are different mediums with different processes, like for sure, 100%. For me, it is all like the things cost what they cost, and it's. You know, if somebody asked for a complicated thing, like, yes, it's going to cost more, but it also would do that if I had thought of that myself. So, right. This is specific to me and my medium. That is not even all dice makers. That is my philosophy that I have shared about how I do this specific thing. Making this so clear, I am not speaking for any other artist in any other format.
Well, it's just because we just had an episode that was essentially talking about like how, like, because I love that a lot of artists want to have quote unquote standard rates, but that's kind of impossible when people are always asking for custom stuff, and it's like no. If someone wants a soupler, see, I do it too.
We're so good at words today.
Right? Words are like, thank God I have a podcast.
Yeah, it'd be a real shame if you had to like use words all the time in your work.
Right? It's so... And I leave this stuff in there, one, because I do think it's funny. And two, because I don't want anyone to think like this is polished.
Yeah. It's like, hey, we are human too. And sometimes our brains forget what order words are supposed to be in or letters are supposed to be in order to make the sounds to communicate things. It happens.
Right, exactly. But we just had an episode where we were talking about like, if it's super complicated, please charge more, because it is more of your time. It's more of your brain power. It's more of your artistic abilities. Like, there shouldn't be standards. There should be industry minimums, but that's about it.
Yeah, I think that might be a better way to phrase kind of like how I am approaching my stuff too. So if somebody asks for something where I'm going to be doing dice blanks and it's got Mylar in it and they want me to put something on the surface of the blank, like do stickers or do someone, I had to paint something. I'm not an artist. I had to learn how to make something that looked okay. And like, that is the thing. You're like, yes, I will charge more for that more complicated thing. So there is that, but I've kind of, I guess the way I should probably phrase this, I've kind of standardized in my head like what those different things will mean, because it is also much easier for me to compartmentalize those things. As an artist, you've got such a wide range of things, and I've heard some people say like, hey, like this is kind of the base price for a character commission, but like if you have wings, if you have detailed armor, if you have like that is going to charge extra. That's going to be more, as it should. And I kind of do that for dice too. It's like if I'm using dice blanks, that is going to have to be more because I'm going to have to double cast that. And if you want the color shift things, that is going to have to be more. If you want me to include, I no longer allow asking for dried flowers in dice in my commissions. I did those for a little while. They're so unpredictable in which ones will like does the flower actually look like this, or did they use a dye in it so it's going to leach out when I cast it?
Yeah.
Who knows? So, but it used to be like, cool, you want me to do dried flowers? Like, that is going to be a whole other process, because dried flowers are so much air, they try to float. So you have to like do things in layers so that they'll be in the middle. So it's like, there is an expansion on the pricing structure for the extras, but like that, there is that. I want to make that very clear. But yeah, there's definitely more nuance to illustrations and whatnot for sure.
Right.
I can kind of slot things a little bit better.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I love when someone's like, so how much is like an average map?
Ooh.
Oh, I mean, now I kind of can, because I started, it is one of the reasons why I do have a rather high number for, because I tell everyone like a world map is $4,000. And the reason that it is so high is that is the most complicated map I could make. Would be about $4,000. So are all the world maps I sell $4,000? No. But if I don't know what I'm saying yes to, then I'm absolutely going to price it out at the top, because
so you can be pleasantly surprised when it's actually a lower number.
Right, exactly. And I've had somebody like, it's $4,000 for it, and then somebody hands me what they want me to make, and I was like, okay, so just it's not going to be $4,000. Like, this is I can do this in a day here, and so but there's so many people like, oh, I need to know this number. I was like, all right, fine, 4,000.
Yeah, I feel like every medium has their question like that, where it's like, how much like would this world map be, and you have to go with the scariest answer and then work your way back, because if you start at a safer answer, trying to get them back on board with it being on the scarier side is more difficult. So it's much easier to be like, yes, this will be $4,000. It can be $4,000. Okay, cool. This thing you actually want is less than that. I feel like for dice makers, that question is, can you put my logo on it, or can you change, like, can instead of the number, can you have a word?
Right.
And it's like, the technical answer to that question is yes, we could do that. I can do that. But it's going to cost a good amount of money, because I have to design that Dice Master, print it, sand that, polish that, make a mold from that, and then start making the dice from it. And that's also a mold I can't use for anything else, because it is just for you. So if you want that, I certainly can, but you are paying for me doing all this other part, all this other work and all these other things that are going to go with it. So I usually just, when somebody asks that question, I go, no. And the only time I'll ever walk that back is if, like, I've had someone approach me and start asking the question. They go, oh, okay, I was just wondering, because I'm this manager at a game store, and we've been looking for somebody who can do something for us to do like promo sets with them. Like, okay, you're having a different conversation. I can give you the real answer of, like, technically yes, because you're not looking for just a one-off thing. So yes, this is a conversation we can have at this point. But so many other random people don't know how much work goes into the thing, so it is so much easier to go, no, I can't do that. And saves us all the headache of it, versus me going like, yes, but it's going to, or sometimes I'll go, yes, but it would cost a minimum $500. And they're like, why? And then I can go into all of these other things that have to happen before I could even make the dice.
Oh yeah, nobody ever comes back with why. I just get ghosted.
And fair. Then, you know what? That's also, it means that they're not wasting your time anymore either. So that's okay.
Oh yeah, like, I've never been insulted except for when it's been a bigger company.
Yeah. I feel like a company should have the decency to be like, not in our budget, but thank you. Like, a company should do that. And a random Joe Schmo individual is somebody being like, hey, can you make me a set of dice? Like, here's the cost, and them not responding. It's like, cool, I understand what happened here. That's fine.
Oh yeah, 100%, and I've now learned to, like, now I put the words, this is negotiable.
Yeah.
On it, because again, the hilarious thing to me is how obsessed people are with like, oh, I can't show anyone anything I'm doing. They're going to steal the idea. This is such a great idea. And I'm like, I don't want to be mean, but it's literally just a bunch of mountains and trees. Like, it's the same thing, just drawn in different patterns. Like, unless there's something wholly unique about the map I'm going to make for you, they can't tell the rich and interesting thing about this world from the map.
Yeah, it's like,
You know?
yeah, you've built a whole narrative that I'm sure it might be very amazing and unique, and
Right.
you want to keep that to yourself. Nobody's going to glean a lot of that from the map. Like that, you're safe. That's fine.
Right. But also, like, you're trying to hire me,
Mhm.
but you don't want to show me the map, so I can't tell you how much it's going to be because I don't know how much work it is. So, you know, so now I'm just like, fine, it's $4,000, but that's negotiable because, god damn you people.
Yeah, very very big. How much does this cost? I don't know. What's your budget? Standoff energy.
See, and I hate that. I'm going to be
Oh, yeah.
honest.
Oh, it's
the
awful.
moment I'm talking to somebody and I'm like, okay, so what are your rates? If they go, well, what is your budget? I no longer want to
Nope.
work with you.
Absolutely.
Tell me what your rates are. If I can't afford it, then like I'll be honest. I don't ghost people. I do let you know, and I'm really like, okay, yes I can, no I can't, or like I don't have that. Would I be able to pay you off? Would I be able to, like, can I do installments? What, you know? I'm like, how can we work around this? Like, the moment somebody won't tell me their rates, and I've actually had this conversation with projects that I've done where somebody's like, oh, well, you know, like, what are your budgets? And I'm like, well, I don't have one yet. I'm working on whatever. And I'm just trying to get an idea. I would love to hire you. Let's, you know, what are your rates?
Yeah.
Well, tell me what your budget is.
Yeah, it's like I don't have a. I also recently had this conversation with somebody. I was trying to initially put together a budget for an upcoming Kickstarter for somebody, and they're like, I would like to hire somebody to do this. I don't know what that would kind of cost. So I reached out to a couple of people, be like, hey, we're doing initial budgeting and figuring out like what would we need to ask for in the Kickstarter in order to cover the cost of hiring you. So like,
Right.
what would your rate be? And they're like, well, what's your budget? I was like, we're building the budget. The budget doesn't exist right now. I need to know from you, what is the number that makes sense?
Right. So
Yeah.
I need to put that into the initial price. So I need to know, like, so I can break it down like per unit, or, you know, whatever your product is, you know, like it's so frustrating, and I'm immediately like, I no longer want to work with you.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
almost instantly. Oh.
Yeah. And if it's a
Okay.
variable rate thing, like art can be, where it's like, well, it depends. It's
Right.
like, okay, like tell me what your like what is your bare bones minimum kind of thing. Like
Right.
let's start with that, and then tell me what factors go into that changing. You don't have to tell me exactly what that does to the number, but like let me know what we're working with. And like,
Right.
I need something, because yeah, it's like
Give-
I can put any number you tell me into this spreadsheet. I just need
Yes.
I need a starting point.
Right. Give me an average. Well, the average, you know, whatever. If you don't have an average, go, okay, well, how about I did work with this company and this is how much I charge them, or, you know, and this is why. Or I did work with this company and this is how much I charge them. Like, give me something.
Yeah.
Something.
Like at this point, I now know that if I'm working on a project where they want a map, I go, cool, I know to budget $4,000 for Devon Rue, and it might be less than that, but
Right.
I have a number I was able to start with and can work within. That's all I need. Yeah. So it's like everybody, you should have rates. You should have rates, or at least a rough approximation of a rate, so that way some people are not actually out to try to swindle you into working for less than a minimum wage and things like that, or to ghost you on things. Sometimes they do just genuinely want to know, so that way they can budget for what
Right.
you think your time and efforts and skills should be worth.
Right.
Not
If I
everything's a
wanna-
trap.
Exactly. And I understand, because there's a lot of people who also like, oh, I don't want to price myself out of doing this project. I totally get that. But also at the same time, like, I'm very big on paying anyone I work with their asking wage. Tell me what you need to make. So, like I'm doing my cartographer's deck, tarot deck, and I have a bunch of friends of mine that I absolutely want to hire to bring on to do some of the divine cards. And I'm like, everyone tell me well, technically I found out everyone's rates before I asked them.
It was like a test they didn't know they were taking.
Right? Well, here's the thing though. I love my friends. Absolutely, I know that they'd be like, I'll do it for free. No,
Yeah.
no, you won't.
It's like, I know you would. I'm telling you, that's not allowed.
Right, So I got all of the rates beforehand. And what I did was I averaged, took I was about to say I was going to average out their rates, but I didn't. I actually took the highest rate, and that's what I'm paying everybody.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's
well,
awesome.
because I absolutely hate projects that ask everyone what their rate is and then just pay that instead of...
Yeah. Like the fact that my reaction was, oh, it's really cool you did the ethical thing. Like that shouldn't have been my gut reaction at all. But like it is so rare for people to do this. Like, oh, you want this number? I will give you this number. And that means some people are getting paid like way more or way less or whatever. And so you were like, no, like this is what I'm going to do. And that's phenomenal. And also a really great lesson for companies and whatever that you as an individual are doing this. And it's harder for an individual to manage for so many reasons. Companies don't have any excuse.
It's also a good way for, I think that so many artists, again, don't want to price themselves out of it. And that's fine. But that's when you say, again, this is negotiable. Like, I really want to do this project. Please tell me if this is like way out of your budget or not. And this is such a tiny industry. And aside from working with the very, very few big names that aren't, let's just call it the people that Hasbro owns, the people that work at Wizards of the Coast are in our community. Hasbro is not. Let's face facts. Everyone else who works in this industry pretty much is part of the gaming industry. They're not here to, there's not a whole lot of money to make. This would be a really bad option of like, hey, I'm going to be a billionaire by making modules for D&D. Sure. Especially now in our economy. So like everyone here is a small creator and nobody here is necessarily trying to make a ton of money on you. And yeah, there are some people who absolutely are. But they thankfully show themselves fairly fucking quickly or in such a grand fashion that none of us want to work with them again.
Yeah. It's we all talk about like the industry is tiny, but I think it is so much smaller than I think a lot of people realize. And everybody talks to each other, and I would dare say there's like maybe 3 degrees of separation between any one creator in the space and another. Maybe 3. So it's like word does travel so quickly. And so it's like if you are trying to cheat somebody or are feeding them bullshit or like any number of negative things, insert asshole behavior here, everyone is going to find out about it eventually. And when it starts breaking containment, like your whole ass is out there for everyone to see. Like, and if you didn't already know that, I feel like the last couple of months should have really re-highlighted that for a number of people. That like, hey, if you're gonna try to pull a fast one on somebody, that's not gonna stay a secret. So pay people fairly, treat them with respect, and don't try to start shit.
Right. And this absolutely goes way beyond like people trying to hire like artists and stuff. This goes to artists themselves. Again, one of my favorite things about this podcast is before we ever start recording, I get to I get to talk to people. And we do talk. We absolutely talk. If there is somebody in this industry that is stepping on someone else or anyone else to climb whatever ladder they think is there, just using people to get, somewhere in this industry, we all talk about you. Especially when you are somebody who has very little regard for the community itself. there is, or was, because they're no longer in this community, but there have been numerous people who made it painfully evident that all they cared about is whether they get notoriety for what they were doing and didn't care if they stepped on anyone else's toes or, and absolutely just tried to use people to get somewhere. We all started talking because there's just so many times that you can be burnt by something where you get asked to be on a project where that person is on and you're like, no.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
There are my list of people that I will immediately red flag not be involved with is small, but it is there. And that applies to this industry, that applies to like film projects. I recently turned out working on a film project. Somebody's like, "Oh, this is the producer." And I went, "No, thank you." Like I know I don't want to be around that person. But yeah, there are people in every industry that I touch. I'm like, cool. I know I don't want to be around these people, either because they are just wholly unpleasant, or they are actually toxic or abusive, or like I feel unsafe. And it's like, no, I'm not going to do any of that. And there are things that I have wanted to work on in the tabletop industry, where somebody has wanted me to either come do a project management thing, or I have been fortunate enough to do some very short, like 1-shots and 3-shots in some streamed games, where I have found out some other people are going to be involved, and I will find a way to bow out because I'm like, I don't want to start anything, but also I do not want my name associated with this other individual. And just to protect my own peace and my own reputation, I don't want that to turn out to be a thing like, oh, you did a thing with this person before we all knew they were awful. And it's like, okay, yes, I also learned together, like, yes, this is bad, and I would like to disavow that, and I don't agree with any of that. No, this is new information for all of us, but I don't want to have to deal with that stank.
Right. As somebody who has incidentally worked with numerous companies that have shown their fucking ass. Oh, I can say, and this is one of the things that I actually really do love about the tabletop industry. Numerous times there's been some scandals with companies I've worked with, and I genuinely at one point was kind of feeling like a complete fucking jinx. I'm like, wow, y'all work with me and then you just show your ass. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. But thankfully enough, most people are like, yeah, no, how would you know? You don't work for them, you don't, but some of the companies I worked with where I've done a lot of projects with, it's been like, oh, how did you not know? Well, that's easy because I only work with one person or two people at best at a company.
And like from a distance, like not physically there and like over. Yeah, there's enough degrees of separation. It's like, how would you know? But again, that requires maybe a little bit more critical thinking from people of the idea of like, what part of this did you interact with? How could you reasonably have known about X, Y, or Z?
Right. And to me, it's hilarious because, yeah, we all do talk. Absolutely. But at the same time, if something is going on where whoever is involved isn't online and isn't social, then we have no way of knowing. Like if somebody at a company isn't the person who manages the social media and doesn't have a social media presence of their own, then we wouldn't fucking know.
Yeah, and especially with the way social media has kind of like collapsed over the last year or two, it's like even when those things do happen, sometimes you can just miss it. And if you don't know to go looking for it, you won't necessarily find it. And on some occasions, even if you know to go looking for it, search functions aren't as reliable as they used to be. So there is only so much you can do, and it does kind of feel like there's kind of constantly a main character happening on a social media platform. And if you're not on, like, I am relatively new to TikTok still, so when somebody has shown their whole ass over there, I've had no idea about it. And
Right.
somebody's like, oh, you didn't know? And it's like, no, because like there's 18 different places to exist now. And I'm also trying to manage my own business where I am the full creator, marketer, bookkeeper, like all of these things. I can't be as chronically online as I almost need to be aware of who all is an asshole.
Right. Same. Like, I absolutely love how many times that somebody has messaged me over something happening. And I'm like, how the fuck would I know? I literally get on social media, I post my thing, I answer a couple people who comment on my posts, and then I go back to drawing because honestly, that's what I do all day.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know any of this is going on, and then I'm like, I've made a comment on someone else's video, and that's how I found out that one of the companies I used to work with was being an asshole. And I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean? What controversy? Shit. And now
Yeah.
I've got to scramble to message other people. And it was funny because I have people that like, I'm damned if I do and I'm damned if I don't. Like, one, there's so many people who seem to think that we need to live online, but then if we do, then we're just being performative.
Yes.
Which is really weird to me. But the other thing is, like, if I can't even remember what it was that somebody asked me or accused me of not doing years ago. And I was like, how would you know? Like, how would you know whether or not I am or am not giving to a charity or am not involved in a movement if I'm not posting it online? And if I'm posting it online, aren't I just doing it then for performative reasons? Like,
Yeah.
this is a really weird conversation for me to have.
Yeah. There is no winning. There
Right.
just isn't. So I think one of my biggest struggles is coming to accept the idea of like all I can do is the best that I feel like I can do, and other people are going to come to their judgments regardless. And just and trying to be better about identifying people who are not acting in good faith, and just being like, if you've decided I'm bad because you haven't seen me supporting this cause or seen me donating over here, seen me doing that, I'm like, there is no amount of proof at this point that is going to change that opinion, and it doesn't make it not exhausting to have to like see or read or be like, okay, well, this is a thing that has at least taken some of my attention. And I'm just gonna go back into my little hole and keep doing what I'm doing and sand 18 million more dice faces and just keep go. I'm just gonna try my best to go about my day because they've already decided I'm the villain, and that's fine, I guess. And I say that as somebody who also has a deep need for everyone to like me, while also recognizing they won't. And these two inside of you are two wolves, and right. they're this, and it's a struggle. And I'm saying it out loud, and in a hopes that maybe someday I will take my own advice.
See, I'm already there. Like, yeah, you don't need to fucking like me.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna be like, one of my favorite fucking stories of this is oh god. So I'm just gonna leave it very general. Not that I think this person by any means follows my podcast. But just because it's a very long and convoluted story. Essentially it comes down to I was helping someone else out with a business that they were running, and this one person decided that we needed to be friends. Uh-oh. And I'm like, listen, I'm just here part-time to like get them going and doing correct procedures and everything else, taking care of like cash registers and stuff. Like, this is what I used to do for a living. So I'm just like, it's fine, And no, they absolutely needed me to like them. And at one point, came into the office like holding a piece of paper, and I don't even remember what was on it, but tried to essentially like tell me the type of personality that I have. And like, well, so yeah, it was one of those like, oh, you have like, I don't know, like an orange personality or an orange aura, or so I don't know, some shit. And like my personality is green or some shit. I don't even fucking know. It was like Cosmopolitan on steroids. And they were so obsessed with it But when they said this to me, I didn't mean to laugh, but also I could not stop myself. Because it was the weirdest thing to have somebody, like, I literally had said to them the day before, like, hey, listen, like, I don't hate you or anything like that. It's just like, I don't know, we're not friends. Like, we're coworkers at best, but not really, because I'm not working for this company. I'm doing a favor for a friend. Like, we don't need to like each other. It's okay.
Yeah,
like,
we can be acquaintances. Like, this is
right.
we can exist in the same space and not have it be anything more than that.
Yeah, and then she comes in the next day with this piece of paper and talking about how I have an orange personality or something, and I absolutely died laughing. And I felt really bad, but also didn't, because it was a very, very strange moment. And I was like, we don't need to be friends. Like, I don't know, like, I don't hate you, but I'm not going to be here long enough for, even if we were friends, for it to matter. Like, I'm moving, literally. You know, I travel in an RV at the time, so I'm like, I'm not going to be here. Like, why? And again, like, us being friends has nothing to do with your job. But it was so funny because I was like, yeah, no, we're fine. And one of my actual friends was like, wow, you don't, that's a whole lot of thing to unpack. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, everyone wants to be liked. I was like, well, I don't want to be hated.
Yeah.
It's just, like, it's not a necessity for everyone to like me. Like, I'm very well aware I am not everyone's cup of tea. Like, again, I've had a whole Reddit thread dedicated to how much I suck.
Oh.
Oh, yeah, it was hilarious. Oh, it really was. And listeners of the podcast already know, like, I think it was on Reddit. I keep saying it because it's the only thing that I remember, and I'm not 100% sure. All I remember was it had something to do with Critical Role, and then...
Of course it did.
Of course, yeah. And then my name was mentioned, and then there was this whole fucking thread underneath it with, like, how my maps suck, and they look like this, and this isn't how rivers work or some shit.
Oh.
And, like, oh, it was so fucking funny. But I have two things. I have to, I want to get them, what is that called? Crocheted? Not crocheted. Cross-stitched. I want to get them cross-stitched so I can put them on my wall. One of them was, I hate her fucking name. I can't escape it. It's everywhere.
Okay.
I was like, huh. Okay. Well, you ain't seen nothing yet, motherfuckers. And, and the other one was, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Maps don't belong on everything. They are now. Let me tell you, listener, if you don't know, on my website, if you want yoga pants with maps on it, go to my website. If you would like skirts, dresses, nightshirts, jackets, tumblers, wine goblets, like everything, mouse pads, gaming pads, notebooks, anything that you can pretty much get a map on, go to my website, devinrude.com. You'll find it there. Please buy something and prove, like, hey, you should put maps on it. They're pretty maps.